Hello, it is another day. It is another sports card video. Guys, thank you very much for joining me here today. Got a little bit of sun yesterday. Went to my first track meet for the kids. And man, it was a 12-hour stint. We did not prepare properly. We thought it was going to be maybe like 3 or 4 hours. Kind of like, I know it's like swim meets where you're kind of like waiting all day to see the one swim or whatever that your kids are in. This was an all-day affair. We got there at 8:30 a.m. and they started running at 4 p.m. But we were there to cheer on the team. It was good stuff.
Yes, exactly. But
if you're new here, you're looking for just about daily sports card collectible style content and friends, don't waste any more time. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button down below. We appreciate all your support. We are a growing and we always appreciate you. Today, we've got a combo episode of what's selling at COMC. We've got our top fives data from COMC.com. They send it over. And then we also have the sports card therapist take on collecting content. Make sure you stay till the end. All right, let's not waste any more time. We're going to start with baseball. Let me first say too, this information comes directly from COMC.com. It is today, we're going to talk about football, baseball, basketball, and hockey. And it's all sales on the COMC.com site, as well as the auctions that go on eBay from COMC, and then also port sales as well. Throw it all in a bucket and out pops the top five. So for baseball, and actually site-wide, Shohei Ohtani dominated not this past week, but the week prior in volume and total sales. Shohei Ohtani stuff is moving on COMC.com. So he sits at number 1 for baseball. Number 2, we've got Pete Alonso, home run hitter. Number 3, we've got Brent Rooker, or Rooker. I know the baseball people are going to crush me. I'm assuming that's a prospect or a guy that's been in the league for a couple of years. Number 4, Mike Trout. And number 5, Francisco Linder. Apologies, you guys know I'm not a big baseball guy, but I assume that Brent Rooker, is he a prospect? He's got to be an up-and-coming prospect, or maybe he's not. But let me know in the comments below. We move on to basketball. Now, Michael Jordan, as we talk about, Michael Jordan is really the king in basketball. But for active players, number 1, it's usually LeBron James, and it is again this week. LeBron James is number 1. De'Aaron Fox and the Kings trying to upset the Golden State Warriors. He sits at number 2. Number 3, Jimmy Butler. COMC told me this is the first time that he's popped into the top 5. The Heat upset the mighty Bucks. What does it mean for Giannis cards? What does it mean for Giannis as a whole? The guy's still young. He's got time, but man, it was weird to see him go out. I know the Bucks were kind of an odds-on favorite in the East, and the Heat came up strong against them, and Jimmy Butler has moved into the top 5. Jimmy Butler stuff is moving. Number 4, Steph Curry. No real surprise there. He's usually here. And then number 5, Anthony Edwards. A lot of transactions for Anthony Edwards. We move to football. Number 1, Jordan Love. I have to assume that Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets had something to do with this. Jordan Love, a lot of excitement in Green Bay, or maybe hesitation, nervousness in Green Bay about Jordan Love. Can he be the guy? But with all the back and forth drama stuff with Aaron Rodgers, I'm sure that Packers fans to some degree have to just be like, hey, man, it's time to move on and just figure it out. You know, we've got to live on. It's kind of like what happened, 20 years ago about with Brett Favre when he moved on to the Jets and then eventually the Vikings. You know, it was time. It's very ironic that Rodgers is going to the Jets, considering Favre also went to the Jets. But, you know, it is what it is. It is a new day in Green Bay. Jordan Love sits at number 1. Number 2, T-Law, Trevor Lawrence. A ton of excitement around this guy in Jacksonville. And, you know, as a Saints fan, I pull for the Jags just because it is one of those franchises. It's a fairly new franchise over the last 20 years or so. And, you know, you've seen them kind of do some good things, but they're an underdog team, and they've got their quarterback. Trevor Lawrence he came out last year. Got a good coach now with Peterson. It's going to be fun to watch this Jags team. Number 3, Justin Jefferson. Folks like Justin Jefferson, obviously one of the best wide receivers in the NFL there in Minnesota. Number 4, Patrick Mahomes II. He is moving on COMC, arguably the best player in all the league. His stuff has been expensive. It has been coming down, and I think a lot of people probably just trying to figure out when is a good time for me to get in on Patrick Mahomes cards. He's obviously that next guy, barring injury. I mean, Tom Brady is now retired. It's now Mahomes' league, and we're all just living in it. And Derek Carr. Just kidding. Sort of. Come on, Derek Carr. Who dat? And then we round out with Mac Jones. Mac Jones, an interesting prospect there in New England. He's got one of the best coaches in the NFL with Belichick. Can they turn it around? Now Aaron Rodgers is in the division. Miami is pretty good. And then there's Buffalo that everybody has forgotten about, and they're actually a really good team as well. So that AFC East, all of a sudden, looking very, very good. That division is looking really strong. All right, we'll move over to hockey. Number 1, no surprises here, Connor McDavid. Number 2, Jack Hughes. Number 3, Austin Meadows. Number 4, Patrick Kane. And number 5, Alex Ovechkin. Some of the mainstays, I would say, in the top 5. Those are usual suspects there. A lot of hockey cards transacted on COMC.com. They do have that deal with Upper Deck and E-Pack, where you open up your E-Packs, you move them over to COMC. It's a fairly seamless process. And so hockey, very, very popular on COMC.com. All right, let's move over to the sports card therapist. Had a thing or two to say about content, getting back in the hobby, collecting. And the major overall point that I really agree that he is making is when we get back into the hobby, we have to figure out kind of what our PCs are going to be. What is our focus going to be? How are we going to hobby, so to speak? Everybody's got kind of their own way of doing it, and there's no right or wrong way of doing it, whether it's low end or high end or mid end or football or soccer or whatever you're going to do. Stranger Things cards. For me, it's taken a while, but I have settled into Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Hall of Fame autographs, and then also Stranger Things cards are really kind of my go-to for the non-sports culture card stuff. And then I also buy graded comic books and graded video games and other stuff too. I've got a full arsenal of collectible type stuff that I'm interested in. But you don't have all those things nailed down when you first get in, and it's a continuous evolution. You know, it starts off one way, and then you get into something else, and then you get into something else. And that's really kind of the fun part of collecting. Now, there are certain people that are player collectors and they're zero in focused on one player, and you can do it that way as well. You know, there's many different ways to do it. And so anytime I hear it's like this way or that way, or these cards or those cards, it's like, dude, just let everybody do their thing. And that's what we do. All right, guys, I'll throw it off to Rob. Frank, that is your cue. Tee it up, man. No, tee it up. Oh my God.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to the Sports Card Therapist on the Sports Card Dad Network. How are you doing? My name is Rob. I hope all is going well with you this week. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to talk about how consuming content has changed the way that I collect over the years. And you know, I think I've talked about it a lot on my podcast and on my channel about how I'll speak for myself. You know, I'm a creature of habit. Also, I find myself sometimes like following the masses. You know, it's like one of those things where it's like trying to keep up with the Joneses, but at the same time, seeing what everyone else is getting. And especially if you're on social media and, you know, I'll give an example. Football season's coming up. So everyone's posting their Trevor Lawrence cards or their Herbert cards or things like that. Right. And for me, I think without actual content, and I'm not considering social media, I'm putting that kind of separate, even though social media is sports card content as well. But I think without having podcasts and YouTube shows to listen to, I would probably be stuck in that big circle of like sheep. You know, just kind of going with what everyone else was collecting. You know, I think it took me a little while to realize, like, I don't have to keep up with the Joneses, and I can really collect any which way I want. And this is something I was actually talking to Oz from Cousins Collectibles about not long ago, right? I think, and one thing that I started to see, and I think one thing that I actually partook in was, you know, when the pandemic happened and I started buying cards again, right? It's not like I just came back into the hobby, because I feel like I never left the hobby. I just stopped buying. I still had all my cards. I still had all my memorabilia, but I had just stopped buying. So when the pandemic happened, and we saw this huge rise in these like iconic kind of cards, you know, even the high pop cards, right? You know, whether if it was like the Zion Prism base, the Luca base, whatever the case, I think we saw a huge rise in prices with those. So I think it was easy to kind of get caught up with wanting to buy those cards too. We see everyone else is buying them. Like the flex on social media 2 years ago was posting 30 PSA graded Luca base prism cards. Like that was a flex. Like I have 30 of these, not just one, And now I think I see the evolution a little bit different. And this is something that Oz from Cousins Collectibles and I were talking about, how I think the people that really stayed in the hobby post pandemic, I think that we started to realize, well, we're upside down on a lot of cards, right? Because I think like most of us were buying during the peak because we didn't know when the peak was going to stop, when it was going to come down. So we're upside down on a lot of cards that if we were behaving like sheep during that time in any kind of way, we're not only upside down on cards, but we're upside down on cards that we don't even want, that we don't even like, So I've kind of like given myself permission to be like, you know what? Like, I'm going to collect whatever it is I want to collect. If I want to collect music cards, I'm going to collect music cards. If I'm going to collect PSA graded autographs, I'm going to do that. If I'm going to collect meaningful ticket stubs, I'm going to do that. If I'm going to collect a player like Eli Manning, who isn't the most lucrative investment in the hobby, you know what? I'm going to collect Eli Manning. And if I'm going to end up upside down or in the red on cards, I truly want to stick with that whole notion of if all cards went to zero tomorrow, would I be happy with the cards that I had? And that's kind of where I've been at. I've just been picking up cards that I absolutely love, that are meaningful to me. And for me, iconic rookie cards are absolutely where it's at. And that's why I just don't do much modern, and I'm not knocking modern, but modern I feel like is such a risk. And really the best way, other than the market exploding organically or pandemic wise, whatever the case, I think it's the best way to really maximize your investments is the prospect. But for me, it's just too risky. I don't want to prospect. I don't want to get caught holding the bag. Is it a great feeling when you can, really make some money on prospecting? Yeah, it's great. I'm sure it is. But I would much rather play it in the slow lane, low and slow kind of thing. So I guess that's it, So I think by consuming content, that really helped me open my eyes to see that, wow, people do collect differently. People are super unique in the way that they collect. And I'm not saying I didn't know that or I wouldn't have come to that conclusion without content being out there. But I think by consuming content, what it does is, and it depends on the content you're consuming, right? Like I've talked before about curating your social media feed. Well, I like to curate my content feed, all the content that I consume, podcasts, YouTube shows, reels. I try to curate that as much as possible. So if I feel like I'm getting educated by content, if I feel like I'm getting educated and entertained at the same time, then I feel like I can make a much more educated and well-informed decision on my PC, if that makes sense. So for me, consuming content, as long as it's the right content, can absolutely change the course of any collector, and I know it has for me. So I guess that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much to Dustin, Sports Card Dad Network, and that's it, guys. Don't forget, take care of yourselves and your collection. Have a good one.